Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today we're going to be talking about melding and stat tiering. Now, whenever I make these videos about the rotation guides as well as the level 80 overviews of the jobs, a lot of people ask me what should I meld on X job, and it depends a little bit from job to job. In general, you want to aim for certain stat tiers, I guess you could say, and of course skill speed is very important as well. So just saying meld crit or meld direct hit, stuff like that, is not necessarily a guaranteed surefire way of always being right, because you wouldn't be. In general, there is going to be a best in slot list, which is going to have a wide variety of different stats that you want. Like for example, you want a certain skill speed tier to where your rotation is going to work the best. Then you're gonna look towards how much crit can I get, how much determination do I need, can I get some direct hit as well. It all depends on what you want, and it also depends a little bit on the job that you play. For example, Monk really likes crit rate and critical hit, basically then as a stat, because Monk scales that well with crit, because more crit means more chakras. Something like a Warrior also really likes crit and determination because of their inner release and inner chaos always being guaranteed direct hit crits. So for that reason, Warrior doesn't like direct hit. The other tanks, however, do like direct hit, so it still depends a little bit on what job you play towards what the stats you're going to be prioritizing are. If you are a job that can basically utilize all of the things really well, like for example, say a Gunbreaker, for example, when we look at tanks, can use both crit, death and direct hit quite a lot, so we're gonna be making a little bit more of a stat spread in between the three of them, whereas with Warrior we're really focusing on crit and death. So that's kind of that. If you really want to know your best in slot piece of list, go to the Balance Discord. They have best in slot lists for every single job in the game. So if you're interested in what you want without needing all of the backstory to it, I guess you could say, just go look over there, because you could just follow and copy what they are doing over there. If you are however interested in how all of the things work, then keep watching the video. So first of all, stat tiers. What are these things? Basically, whenever you put X amount of stats into a certain stat, you're going to get an increase in a tier, and once you go above your tier, you upgrade the tier, that is where you're going to see a damage difference. The easiest one to show this with is with skill speed. So for example, as you can see right now, I have 1529 skill speed on my Warrior. If I then go check my GCD, I have a GCD of 2.38. Now, if I take in my old axe, which is basically exactly the same stat-wise, but it doesn't have melds, so I'm missing 120 skill speed when I put this on. As you can see, now it's 1409. You're going to be seeing that my GCD is 2.40 in stat, meaning that those 120 extra points in skill speed is going to upgrade my skill speed tier twice, going from 2.40 to 2.38. So that's a really simple way to see how these stat tiers affect your actual gameplay. Now, of course, when we take a look at crit, direct hit, determination, that kind of stuff, you're not really going to be seeing an immediate increase like this, like with skill speed, because skill speed is very easy to see, but it is still there. So when we take a look at how the melding itself works, I'll explain that real quick before we go into all of the tier stuff, because that is a lot more in depth. It's very simple. You click meld. If you click on the weapon itself, or on the other piece of gear that you have, you get to see all of the stats that are on the weapon right here. Now, this doesn't mean that it doesn't allow for other stats to be melded, which I'll show in just a bit as well. So from this we can see that critical hit is maxed out. So if I take another critical hit Materia, you'll see that I gain 0 stats by doing this, so we don't want to be doing this. But then, for example, determination still has points left in it, skill speed also still some room to meld, and then tenacity is 0 as well, meaning I can also meld tenacity and get the full 60 stats. Now, you can also meld stuff that is not like right here as well. For example, I can meld spell speed on this if I really wanted to. Of course, spell speed does not affect physical jobs, so you don't want to put it in there. But something that you will do with tanks is you can put direct hit in those. So you can see I can meld 40 direct hit. It doesn't affect Warrior as much, but when we look at the other tanks, they do like direct hit quite a bit. So for the other tanks, you can pretty much always meld direct hit in pretty much all of your gear, because normal tank gear does not have direct hit available to it, because we have the special stat in tenacity. Now, because of this, you can kind of see what you want, you can see what you do not want, and you can also see where you're going to be over capping. So if we take a look over on my gear right here, you can see that in my earring I have 59 stats of crit instead of 60, and in the ring as well. Now of course, because this one little point that I am missing, or 2 points in total here, it doesn't affect me that much, because I am going to be gaining 118 stats from this, which is going to bring me up critical hit tiers, which is really important because Warrior really wants its crit rate and crit damage, especially the crit damage, to be as high as possible. So that's why I do it like this. Now you can also overmeld stuff. So for example, if I go to my Dragoon still has some crafted gear. You can see that, for example, if I were to melt these pants, because of this crafted gear, it allows me to actually meld extra. So for example, I still have room for direct hits. I'm gonna put direct hit in here. I click on this, it'll say I still get the 40 stats, and you can also see that I only have a 17% chance to actually meld the materia. This is what is called overmelding or forbidden melding. Once you actually finish forbidden melding, like for example if I go to one of my crafters, you can see that the materia are shown in red. This means they are overmelds or forbidden melds. All of these melds have a percent chance to succeed. The chance is really low. The more you go down the list, like for example the third meld will still have a relatively high chance, the fourth meld will be lower, and the fifth meld will have a really low chance on succeeding. So this is stuff that you mainly do for when you go for week 1 clears or something. You try to overmeld your gear as much as possible, or for example when it comes to crafting, you're also usually going to be overmelding your gear quite a bit. Of course, this is not a thing when we take a look at endgame gearing, because of course once you have that best in slot, you only have available to 2 materia slots instead of the 5 which are available with crafted gear. So with normal savage gear you only have available to 2 materia slots. If you of course have an ultimate weapon, you have 3 materia slots, but that is something that most people will not have, and by the time it is out you've already cleared the savage tier anyways, so this is not really going to give you a big edge at all. So that's basically how the materia melding works. Let's now quickly take a look at how you can find out about all of these tiers. So I'm going to switch over to a website right here. I have a Reddit thread open, which I will link in the description, so you can basically read up on all of the simple stuff over here. But if you want to go more in depth, they also have a link to the Theory Jerks website, where you can go into the nitty-gritty stuff of how everything is affected. So I'm gonna, for example, click on critical hit, and then you can see that depending on how many points in crit you have, this is going to be your crit rate, this is going to be the damage bonus on your crits, and then this is also your expected damage. So you can see that we need at least 17 points in crit to get a 0.1% increase in the crit rate and a 0.1% increase in the actual damage. And then of course we can go down as far as we want through all of the different stats. We'll just go out quite a bit. For example, if I have 1300 something, our crit rate is now 10.6% and our damage is going to be 45.6. So that's kind of stuff where you can check like how much crit do I need to get a certain increase. Of course, if you look at direct hit, for example, the way direct hit works is it only gives you a direct hit rate. Getting more direct hit does not increase the damage a direct hit does, because direct hit does not increase your damage. It only increases the rate at which you get a direct hit. So direct hit damage is always the same, so to speak. It only increases the rate, but because it only increases the rate, you also need less stats to get that 0.1% increase on your direct hit. So basically getting 2000 direct hit might be about the same as say 4000 crit when it comes to the rate, but the 4000 crit is going to give you way more damage, because critical hits will deal more damage when you have more critical hit stats on it. So those are kind of things that you can look at. Of course, you also have all of your skill speed tiers right here. So if you are aiming for a specific GCD, you can see what you want right here. Of course, normal base GCD is 2.5. These things are like, for example, if you're an Astro, you have a 1.5 cost on your Malefic, I believe. I think Black Mage is 2.8 on their Fire forecasts and stuff like that. But 2.5 is your normal GCD. And then you can see right here, how much skill speed do I need to get to a certain GCD tier. So for example, with Warrior, you want to have 2.38. So here you can see I need a minimum of 1523 to get the 2.38 GCD. So when we are about to build our best in slot build, we want to aim as close to this number as possible. And then when I go check over here, we have 1529 and this was 1523. So we're only overshooting by a few points, which is really good, because normally, like for example, say we only need this, but if we have, for example, skill speed that is over here, like in the upper 50s, like because we still have quite a bit of this tier to go, this would all be wasted skill points basically. So if I would put in one extra skill speed meld of like plus 60 skill speed, that is 60 skill speed I could have basically put into either determination or critical hit damage and crit hit rate as well, because then that 60 skill speed that would not affect me at all would maybe affect me by getting me into a higher crit tier or a higher death tier, so that I will deal more damage that way. Of course, if you don't want to make your own best in slot list, you can always head over to the balance. As I said, the balance always does all of this tier recrafting for you, so that you can just basically take a look at the best in slot list and then you just copy the list and all of the melds that are in there. If however you want to experiment a bit yourself, you can come over here and then take a look at, oh, these are the stats that I have right now, I can meld myself like this. For example, you can go to a website like Ariala, where you can kind of experiment with all of the melding in your gear and such. And you can come over to this website, you can check all of the stat tiers, and then you're like, okay, I have these amount of stats in my gear, I have these amount of melds in my gear, do I want to maybe switch out a crit meld for a death meld, because the 60 points in crit is not going to grant me an extra tier, but the 60 points in death will give me an extra tier, for example. So that's how you can kind of go about doing those things. Of course, as I said, if you're not interested in trying to figure it out yourself, just go to the balance. Or like usually a week or so after the raid tiers are out, people have these kind of things figured out, so that you can basically follow along and then just do it like that. But it is pretty interesting to know, in my opinion though, so that if you want to try some stuff out yourself, you can do that as well. So that's pretty much that, kind of going over how the melding works in this game and also how stat tiers work. As I said, certain jobs really like certain stats a lot more than others. Like for example, Warrior likes crit death, the other 3 tanks like direct hit, whereas Warrior doesn't. For example, with the casters, Summoner and Red Mage do not like skill speed that much. Black Mage does like skill speed a lot. So it depends a little bit on what job you play as to what you want to be melding, but take these stat tiers into account, because if you're going to go over a stat tier with way too much stats, you're basically wasting a bunch of your stats. Whereas if you would, for example, put maybe 1 or 2 melds from that spell speed into something like critical hit or direct hit, you might gain a bigger damage increase, because your wasted stats on the spell speed that do not increase your tier could maybe increase your tier when you put it in something like direct hit or determination or something like that. So that's going to be it for me. I hope it was helpful. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll leave a link to the Reddit thread in the description as well, where you can also follow the link to the Theory Jerks website if you're interested in all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I'll see you in the next one.